Hi guys, welcome to Giant Talk, the world's first OKR podcast in partnership with Koan, the dedicated OKR platform. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Arvind. Arvind has experience working with large Fortune 50 banking and financial services firms, and he's here to discuss with me today the implementation of OKRs into those firms, and especially how automation is aiding the process. So welcome Arvind, I'm delighted to have you with us for today's episode. Please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your current role.
Hi all, my name is Arvind and I have about 16 years of experience working in product and strategy role. In my experience, I've mostly been focusing and working with Fortune 100 organizations and mostly within the financial services and insurance area. I do have a deep engineering or software engineering background, and I've grown into the product and strategy areas as a part of my career growth. Just for the larger audience, while I keep the big picture in mind, I do a lot of strategies and architecture and everything else. I still write code.
Perfect. Thanks, Arvind. So specifically, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your experience of working with OKRs and MBOs together?
I have been working with OKRs and MBOs from 2017, 2018, somewhere time frame, specifically when I was essentially I got pulled into a role where I was responsible for delivering a tangible outcome out of a software product implementation. Now, the outcomes would be around customer experience improvement, operational excellence, or new revenue generation. These were a broader set of MBOs, and correspondingly, there were a set of OKRs against which we need to design and develop the product that will help us attain those particular OKRs. Now, in my previous role, while I was working for Tata, I was leading transformation and strategy, where we used to commit outcomes to our customers as a part of our product sales. So it would mean that Tata would undertake a financial penalty if the outcome that we are promising out of the product was not delivered. So we designed and launched the products in that particular manner. And obviously it comes along with that, not only just the technology, but also the financial and commercial models around it, which will safeguard the interest of both the parties, both the Fortune 100 or Fortune 200 organization, and obviously Tata. Now, when we had to go out there and chase and build something like this, the way we conceptualize the product features were more prioritized based on the OKRs. Mm-hmm. And the OKRs were tying back to the financial outcomes that we intended to commit to our customer. And so in order to be able to do this in a more repeated manner, in a more manageable manner, we created a custom framework that allows us to do it. And obviously, I cannot go in detail about how we designed that framework, but the whole idea is it is very well possible. You can think about MBOs and OKRs and product features all together in a single integrated manner in a way that you can articulate your value more clearly out of the product that you're building. And obviously aligning that with an outcome which the CIOs or the COO or the C-level executives or the board members are really looking for. So that's a very broad level of my experience working with OKRs and MBOs. Any other questions there, Jennifer?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That gives us a really good overview. So in terms of your experience when OKRs were introduced, how was this change implemented, and did you kind of see a need for a cultural shift to take place?
Yeah, in my recent experience, I'm currently working for a large financial services organization. The MBOs and OKRs I know required a significant amount of cultural change. Mm-hmm. The executive and the middle management layer, and obviously the direct application or the technology managers required extensive training on OKRs and MBOs, because the whole idea of implementing OKR MBO was to make sure the compensation structure is tied back to how well are they really able to accomplish their OKRs and MBOs, correct? Mm-hmm. Now, this created, obviously initially there was a lot of resistance around implementing something like this, but over the period of time, I believe there's a cultural acceptance. Initially, we didn't agree that this has to be tied back to the compensation, basically not tied back to the executive bonuses. But right now, what we're looking at is we are looking at by middle of next fiscal year, we will tie back the accomplishments based on the OKRs and MBOs to the bonuses, to the compensation structure for each and every technology executive. So that upheaval is happening. But honestly, this entire process has taken us 2 to 3 years. But considering the fact that we are talking about a large Fortune 100 organization, the time taken is reasonable. But I would suggest, say, for example, if there's a smaller organization or mid-sized organization, I don't see reason why it should take so long. But candidly, the whole idea is also to about incentivize the executives to drive and demonstrate better results, make sure that they are more focused towards the outcome that they want to achieve. And obviously the organization benefits from whatever we are trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you mentioned about being more focused on the outcome, especially for individuals and teams. I know when we chatted previously to this podcast recording, Arvind, you mentioned that you use an algorithm approach. So how does this work and kind of what are the outputs?
Yeah, so we decided to build an algorithm for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it really didn't make sense. As I said, I come from an engineering background, so I like to automate everything and anything that's possible, right? Yeah. So in order to ensure we are meeting our groups, MBOs and OKRs, the way we approached the problem was we identified the underlying metrics which can be tracked from a defined system of record. Okay. These metrics were then classified as leading and lagging metrics. And now using this data, we were able to create a recommendation system, nothing AI, nothing fancy, simple recommendation system, which helped the executives and their teams with a simple view of where does the bottleneck exist and what should they do to achieve their MBOs and OKRs. Okay? Mm-hmm. In most cases, this is very simple crux of the problem. Most executive teams, they know what the MBOs and OKRs are. They struggle to identify what do they need to do, what are the series of steps that they need to follow so that they can achieve their MBOs and OKRs, right? Now, I'll give you an example, right? So we have an MBO of of high engineering scope in every application in the portfolio. I'm talking about from a technology perspective, right? Let's be clear. So while the engineering score is a very broad KPI, we identified the underlying metrics that impacts this KPI. Now, after carefully assessing how these metrics were impacting the broader KPIs, we created a recommendation system, which automatically analyzed all these data points. And then the system then offered a series of steps which each executive should undertake to improve upon the overall KPI. Now, what we are doing is we are publishing this in a very automated manner. So there's no manual intervention. In fact, just the only point where there's a human involved is the system sets up everything in an email, nicely drafted email. We just have to review and validate, hey, everything is good, press send button, right? That's only one touch button. Now, obviously, what we do is we publish this in a very automated manner every week for the executives to review and validate if their teams have indeed acted upon the recommendations that we shared in last week. Okay. Now, this is also equally important because we want to make sure that recommendations are actually being acted upon. So we have a control loop in place so that we make sure that, hey, these recommendations were given, have the recommendations have been acted upon, and have they really delivered an outcome, right?
Koan is a purpose-built solution for managing your OKRs. Helps your team achieve their objectives and key results, helps them get aligned, and it helps them stay engaged. Shared spreadsheets simply don't scale when you're using OKRs properly, and you're not going to have a maximum impact with them. But with Koan, you can scale your OKRs right across your entire company, keeping your team super motivated and moving everybody in the right direction. Roger, what's one of your favourite features about Koan?
So the thing that I really love about Koan, and have done ever since I first saw it, was how it really puts the conversation around OKRs at the heart of the system, and it really helps stimulate that, which obviously brings really good collaboration. You know, they've got this reflections feature which helps individuals really prepare for the team conversation which is going to come up, where the collaboration is going to take place. So that would definitely be the thing for me, which is the killer feature of the system.
Yeah, no, that's really useful. I think it's a really kind of quite unique approach that we've heard kind of when we spoke to a lot of other guests on the podcast. Not many people have kind of spoken about this automation of recommendations. So I think it's really interesting to learn about. I know you mentioned the impact on your teams there, but kind of removing that manual intervention, how has that impacted your teams?
I'll be honest, right? Now with the recommendation system and the algorithm that we spoke about in hand, the executive leaders and their transformation teams or strategy teams, they have a marching order. They have a clear-cut, defined set of things that they need to do to meet the MBOs and OKRs. Now, given the fact that now we are offering them a step-by-step instructions, we make it easy for them to follow and execute. Now, how it's helped? It has helped us to achieve more than 70% of our yearly target by, in fact, June, right? So we are good. Now we are at a particular point where we are revising our OKRs today. Have we really set ourselves low? Should we look at a more aggressive OKR? And that goes back to the conversation that we had before, saying that, hey, are the executives really willing to change the MBOs and OKRs, given the fact that we already achieved 60% of that in less than 6 months, right? But having said that, that's a conversation that we are continuing to have, and we'll see if we can meet or exceed our OKRs. That's the whole idea, right? Now, within this particular point, what we need to make sure and what we are trying to drive is that the teams spend more time in fixing those issues, fixing those roadblocks, so that they can work to attain their MBO and OKR rather than trying to figure out what is it that they need to do, right? Yeah. And that's where we are tilting the focus towards execution and not about thinking, because the thinking process for most part of it is automated.
Okay, yeah, interesting. I wanted to dial in a little bit into the OKR framework. So on the point that the OKR framework encourages regular check-ins, and you mentioned that obviously your approach is more automated and it reduces those interaction points. So how does this kind of work, and how does this maybe affect the workplace culture?
Yeah, so the recommendation and the reporting mechanism that I just laid out before, the executives and leaderships are now getting access to the trending data of OKRs, including we are able to pinpoint the reasons why the trend is going up and going down, right? Say, for example, engineering score, the simple example that what we had before. Why did the engineering score go down? And what happens is sometimes it takes hours and hours of multiple data analysts and analytic consultants to review and validate this particular data. In an automated manner, we are able to project and explain this is why exactly the trend went down, right? And obviously, this is why the trend is going up. So you get to see the positive and the good side of things too, right? Now, while we do have the monthly cadence with the senior leadership, the interaction points are now limited to areas where the trend has gone down, or the teams are not doing enough to meet their respective goals, right? Now, this is the point where we bring the empathy aspect in the loop, and we work with those respective teams and stakeholders, and we evaluate the underlying reason why that's not happening.
Yeah.
And we look at creating a more of a remedy point or checkpoint to make sure that are we able to circumvent this? Is it a people issue? Is it a process issue? Or probably, God forbid, it could be a technology issue as to why the MBOs and OKRs are not being met. So we accumulate all of that data, put together an integrated strategic view. This is why probably we will be missing out this particular meeting this particular OKR by end of year. Yes, then we should be aware of it, and these are the roadblocks that probably we cannot solve for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're almost defining, like you say, the issues and helping people to solve them. And I know you mentioned when we chatted your experience, and obviously you mentioned it at the top of the podcast, that you've worked with a number of financial institutions. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience of kind of agile work and OKRs across the banking industry?
See, very honestly, the agile is nothing new in banking and financial services. I still remember my first agile project in 2013. And I know the industry has improved a lot by adopting agile practices. I've seen that our ability to push more code changes into the production, ability to be faster in terms of responding back to market changes. All of those things are very, very fundamentally important. And 2013, the reason why we implemented Agile was 2012, 2013 was primarily because I was working for a consulting firm on the large mortgage bank, which was still reeling through the mortgage crisis in 2008 to 2012 and 2014. So there were so many days where we've had situations where there'll be a regulator walking into the CEO's office and asking, "Hey, I need this particular data, and I need this data today," right? And so sometimes what happens is we will get something to be developed by end of day and the request will come in the morning, 6:00. Okay.
Right.
So so Agile has always been there, but leaving all of that aside, the OKRs and MBOs, my perspective is they are relatively newer from an adoption perspective in financial services. I've seen that most of the large Fortune 100 FSIs are adopting to significantly improve their ability to deliver. Right? I know JP Morgan Chase has been doing this, Citi has been doing this from 2017, 2018, Bank of America has been doing that too. Quite a few other large banks. Obviously, the MBOs and OKRs from a C-level perspective allows them to project their progress in terms of numbers. So there's an acceptance at a senior leadership level. It's more about trickling it down to the mid-management level and having them to accept and drive around the OKRs, which had been a challenge, but I think this is over the last couple of years, there's a huge adoption there.
I think it's always interesting to see how kind of OKRs are adopted in different industries. It's really interesting to hear your feedback.
Sure.
Just finally, I just wanted to touch on what's next for your OKR process. What's the kind of thing that you want to work on?
See, I mean, as we're talking and engaging a lot of stakeholders, what I'm observing is that defining OKRs is still a learning process for most.
Yeah.
I believe it is mostly an art and not exactly a skill. Okay. It is mostly an art to define an OKR. Obviously, defining the outcomes and the associated metric also requires a very closer alignment to the execution. So what I mean is that there is a very delicate balance between what we want to accomplish versus what we can really accomplish.
Yeah.
And that's a point where the strategy teams and the transformation team have to work together with the delivery team to understand and empathize with their ability to execute. It could be resource issues, it could be process issues, it could be technology issues, right? So being able to empathize with the issues the delivery teams are having, it's very important for any of the organization to succeed and define a right OKR which they can really meet. Because we want to demonstrate progress, right? We don't have to really go back and tell people that, hey, we have accomplished a lot of things. It's fine if we can accomplish a lot of things, and it's perfectly fine if we could not meet the respective OKRs and MBOs. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But the progress has to be made and the progress has to be demonstrated. That's the whole spirit of OKRs and MBOs.
Yeah, definitely. It goes back to that kind of stretch, doesn't it? If you're kind of meeting your OKRs very easily, then you've not stretched enough in the first place.
Exactly.
No, that was really interesting, Arvind. I found that a really interesting conversation. And like I say, quite different to how a lot of kind of other organisations are running OKRs, especially around the automated piece. So thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, great stuff. And I just wanted to close out the episode by saying, as always, as our listeners, we love to hear your feedback. So feel free to leave us a review or a comment on your preferred podcast platform of choice, or you can email us at growth@therebegiants.com with your feedback as well. And we'll see you next time for another episode of Giant Talk.